Played against Messi, played against Ronaldo, but for me, Mousa Dembele.
He could have gone on and won the Ballon d'Or. That's how good he was.
Mousa Dembele was the best player I've ever seen play football.
He's the best player in the world.
Mousa Dembele from Tottenham, wow, I don't know how. I really don't know how.
I put him next to Ronaldinho, Maradona, Okocha.
The GOAT.
The goal. I'm going to put Dembele.
Mousa Dembele.
Mousa Dembele.
Dembele.
Mousa Dembele.
Everyone says that. What makes him so much better than everyone else?
Freak of nature.
Makes it so easy.
I never seen someone so strong like him.
He's a monster and he's got ballerina feet at the same time.
And technique, he doesn't know pressure.
Yeah, exactly. According to pretty much every player out there, Maldini himself has nightmares about Mousa Dembele, and the last person to dispossess him was Joseph Stalin. But in 7 years as a Tottenham player, he only has 10 goals and 10 assists, and I never really see any fans talking about him, so he must be blackmailing all these players, right? Well, I don't know about Stalin, but I can tell you that in September of 2016, when Sutherland's Didier Dong stole the ball right off his feet, he became the first player to successfully do that in 6 months. 31 consecutive successful tackles, 90 minutes against all three of Liverpool, Man United and Chelsea, and not a single player could put in a successful tackle. Nowadays, you talk about peak Tottenham and people mention Harry Kane, Eriksen and Dele Alli, but do you want another stat? In that infamous 2015-2016 season, Kane played 27 league games with Mousa Dembele on the pitch and scored 24 goals. However, in the 12 games that Mousa Dembele missed, he only scored 1. Kane was 11 times worse when Dembele wasn't there to hold his hand, so really, who was the glue in that team? It isn't even just the players. Go and ask the man himself, Mauricio Pochettino, the guy who built that team. And let me tell you, when Guardiola called it the Harry Kane team, he lost it. But when Dembele got a 6-match suspension, he was the one to come out and claim that without Mousa Dembele, we do not exist. Tottenham does not exist. Do you see what I'm saying? At his peak, Mousa Dembele had a serious argument for being the best box-to-box on the planet. I tell you to think of a Yaya Touré without an eye for goal. But really, in 2016, the CIES published a paper ranking the best box-to-box midfielders in the world. And sure, Yaya Touré was there. But their number one, that was Mousa Dembele. I'm telling you, if you dig deep into any of Tottenham's 3 greatest Premier League campaigns ever, you'll always arrive at the same answer, Mousa Dembele. Look, let's keep going with that 2015-2016 season. That year, Tottenham had the second best attack in the league, only second to City, and the best defensive record altogether. Yet, as you all know, after getting within 2 points of the title 27 games in, they started choking with a defeat to West Ham, and with 3 games left, going up against Chelsea for the Battle of the Bridge with the title on the line, they took a draw, handing the title to Leicester and collapsing so hard that they'd even go on to lose their 2 remaining games against Southampton and Newcastle, falling down to 3rd place on the table at the last minute. But well, guess who wasn't there for any of those 3 defeats? Mousa Dembele, who missed out on the first over a groin injury and the other 2 after getting that 6-match suspension right at the Battle of the Bridge, completely losing it and sticking his fingers in the eyes of none other than Diego Costa. I repeat, this supposedly extremely quiet guy who was frequently been mocked by his teammates for constantly inviting them over to his house to play Settlers of Catan got so pissed watching Tottenham throw away the title that he tried to go one-on-one with The Undertaker. And you know what? It gets worse, because it wasn't just about Kane not scoring without him there to hold his hand, or even about those 3 defeats as the season ended. No, take into account the 17 Premier League games in which Dembele was able to play the full 90, and Tottenham went completely undefeated. Worse, out of his 27 starts, they only lost once, and it was thanks to an own goal by Kyle Walker, and that includes 9 of their 10 matches against the Big Six and both games against eventual champions Leicester. Are you starting to see what those players meant? Every time, this guy would play with that mentality of, fine, I'll do it myself, and he really did it. Of course he was the most important player in that team. He had the whole game in the palm of his hand. As Ben Davies would say, with him in the team, most games I'd have only 1 or 2 defensive actions. The rest was all played out in the opposition's half. Or as another teammate, Kevin Wimmer, explained, when we had no other options, we always had Mousa. He'd never lose the ball. I always say it, the best player ever. And so, the following season, it just happened all over again. Remember, it was after that suspension that Pochettino admitted they were nothing without him, and why? Because they instantly lost 4 precious points in just those 4 opening games before he finally came back. The difference his presence made was so obvious that, by the 36th match day, those 4 points were still the only thing separating them from the top of the table. And yet, ironically, once a minor knock forced him onto the bench, again against West Ham, Dembele ended up watching his team go behind, still being brought in 2 minutes after they conceded, with Pochettino hoping for a miracle, and ultimately losing out on those final 3 points that made up the 7-point difference that gave Chelsea the title. Again, it seemed like Tottenham were one team when Dembele was on the pitch and a completely different one when he was off it. After all, even if struggling with some niggling injuries and unable to play the full 90 for most of the season, well, for the 8 times he didn't manage it, he still went completely undefeated, making it 25 in a row. Look, as his season ended, Pochettino gave a speech that perfectly summarized Dembele's career and the mystery surrounding it. He said, "When I finally write a book about my life, I'll mention him as one of those genius players I was lucky to meet. It's Maradona, Ronaldinho, Okocha, De La Peña, and Mousa Dembele. I always tell him, if we had taken you at 18 or 19 years old, you would have become one of the best players in the world by now." Because that's the thing. What led Pochettino to get this nostalgic about a player that was still there was that knock I mentioned finally forced him to go under the knife to try to fix an ankle injury that he'd been suffering from for years, but it didn't go too well. Upon returning, not only did he admit that he'd only been playing at about 70% fitness the previous season, but he admitted that even though he was willing to play through it, he'd never play without pain again. As you may imagine, for a 30-year-old footballer, that is a death sentence. And the fact Pochettino did everything he could just to get one more season out of a player whose body was giving out, well, that just proves he meant every word of what he said, and I believe a great part of this was motivated by regret, since Pochettino knew better than anyone how much of his best years had been wasted waiting around for the right manager to come along and understand what kind of player they had in their hands. You see, Dembele played 9 seasons as a striker before anyone realized what a mistake that was. After 2 seasons playing for Germinal Beerschot in Belgium, at 18 he moved to Willem II in the Eredivisie, and after 5 months of adaptation where he didn't manage a single goal and his team could only master 2 wins, then out of nowhere he hit 12 goal contributions in 14 games, literally carrying them on his back towards 4 wins and 3 draws throughout that period and into the relegation playoffs where he'd score again to keep them afloat. Meaning that, suddenly, he was debuting for the national team and rejecting Ajax so he could instead join the legendary Louis van Gaal at AZ Alkmaar. And I know what you're thinking, surely he would have noticed he wasn't a natural striker, right? Yeah, but then the kid scored 9 and assisted 6 in his first 16 matches for the club, even while playing mostly as a sub. 4 months in, he was averaging 1.3 goal contributions per 90, so even though he did make some remarks about it, what was he gonna do? In the words of his second coach, if you looked at his data, it was not the typical data of a striker or a target man. He didn't really have any goal-scoring instinct, but he was so strong, he just hold players off and force his way towards goal. He was suffering from his own success. He was making the team of the tournament at the Under-21 Euros, scoring nearly a quarter of Belgium's goals in qualification for the actual 2008 Euros. Honestly, had AZ not choked the title to PSV in the final match day of the season and lost both the cup final and UCL playoffs to Ajax as his goals dried out at club level, he might have forever been branded as just a goal scorer, but strangely enough, thanks to that, Van Gaal lost it a bit and started tinkering. So next year, he started being tested behind the strikers and even made the Olympic Games team of the tournament, outscoring the likes of Messi, Ronaldinho, Di Maria and Agüero. But thankfully, Van Gaal, having seen his team drop to 12th place, decided this still wasn't the perfect place for him and took the radical decision of outright making him the first name on every team sheet and handing him a free role up front, hoping he'd naturally show him where he was truly meant to play. And the result was that 5 matches later, he was dribbling past 4 or 5 players, even coming back to dribble some of them again and scoring one of the league's greatest ever goals. So soon, they were on a 29-match unbeaten streak and winning their second league title ever, 28 years after their first. I don't really know how no one signed him at this point, but it's probably got something to do with the fact that teams aren't really looking to sign players who don't even know themselves what their preferred position is. Or, probably because over the summer Van Gaal left and got replaced with Koeman, who also struggled to figure out what to do with Dembele and was quickly offloaded himself, all while a similar situation followed in the national team where they went through 4 managers in the space of a year, not to mention the injuries. Regardless, with Fulham somehow having just dragged Atletico de Madrid into extra time in an European final, and Vincent Kompany, a fellow Belgian, convincing Dembele that their new manager Mark Hughes would be a perfect fit for him, for a measly €6 million fee, Dembele arrived in England. And though he almost fooled everyone once again with 5 goal contributions in his first 4 games, then 3 injuries left him out for 93 days over the first half of the season, and on his comeback, among criticism that he held on to the ball too much and didn't take enough shots, he then proceeded to take the ball in the center circle and put in a 50-yard run for the goal of the season precisely against Tottenham, meaning that the following year, when Martin Jol took over, he decided to have a little chat with Dembele about his playstyle and proceeded to watch in disbelief as the player admitted to him that growing up, he learned to play football on a basketball court without proper goals, and where instead of shooting, they'd score by dribbling towards the goal line and touching the posts at each end of the court. In his own words, "I don't like to shoot. When I was young, I never shot. I always wanted to dribble the ball into the goal." Remember, aside from that, this guy had only played 1 year of academy football at a proper club. No wonder he didn't have any goal-scoring instinct. Football was literally a different game in his head, and so, once and for all, Martin Jol deployed him on the center of the pitch for the first time ever on Boxing Day 2011 at 24 years old. 6 months later, Jol was calling him the best player I've ever seen on the ball. His teammates had nicknamed him the Doctor because if you give him the ball, he makes things better. The media was calling him the Belgian Zidane, and Fulham were rushing his contract renewal as Mourinho's Real Madrid had made an inquiry about his signing. If you don't believe that, then let me tell you that in fact, it was that summer that they ended up buying Modric instead, which actually jump-started the domino effect that allowed Tottenham to come in at the last minute and trigger Dembele's release clause, stealing his signing from Sir Alex Ferguson on his last ever season. And by the way, you know what's even funnier? Remember when Berbatov cancelled the move to Fiorentina at the last minute to sign for Fulham instead? Well, he only did so because when his ex-manager Martin Jol approached him asking for a favor, he had only one request: that they kept Dembele so he could play alongside him. Which, of course, in order to get his signing, Martin Jol assured them would happen. So, as I was saying, Dembele arrived at Tottenham in that awkward moment between the Redknapp era and the arrival of Pochettino. So, those first 2 years floated by, going from one manager to the other with the occasional moment of brilliance. There was that goal on his debut or the 90th minute winner against Lyon. But as much as those moments caught everyone's eye, they didn't grab anyone's attention long enough for them to realize what changes Dembele needed in order to flourish. So, by the time Pochettino arrived, Dembele was just seen as a signing that had never truly found his place at the club. But, as I've told you, after a year of experimentation, Pochettino was the first to realize that Dembele was not a striker, not a winger, not a number 10, or even a holding midfielder. This was the ultimate box-to-box, one of the rarest profiles in the sport. That was why, even after the injury, he pushed so hard for him to keep going. And thank God he did, because that year, even if Tottenham didn't manage to go any further than third, well, for 4 games in February, we got our best ever glimpse at what Mousa Dembele could have been. First match against Man United and he had Paul Pogba fighting for his life. 3 key passes, 8 ball recoveries, 3 tackles, all successful. Then, against Liverpool, he toyed with the soon-to-be Champions League finalists, and against Arsenal, not only did he start the play that led to their only goal, but it took an hour and 50 touches before he gave the ball away. So much so that The Guardian claimed that watching Wilshere try to stop him was like watching a chipmunk wrestle a grizzly bear. However, it was that 4th match against Juventus that really opened everyone's eyes to just what kind of talent we had just wasted. On his first ever Champions League knockout stage appearance, Dembele took 117 touches, made 99 passes with 95% accuracy, created 2 chances, recovered 8 balls and made 3 tackles. No Juve player was able to complete more than 10 passes in Dembele's half, but he completed 73 in theirs. Find me another stats line like that in a match of that level. I'm telling you, you can't. In great part because Dembele himself would only make 15 more starts before his ankle gave out for good later that year. He had warned Pochettino that he couldn't take another season, but he insisted. In fact, he even insisted a 3rd time before he left for China, probably because he knew he was irreplaceable. Since he arrived in England, only Hazard had completed more dribbles than him, yet he had never made a single error that led to a goal and only 3 players had made more tackles. No one gets even remotely close to ranking as high for both offensive and defensive stats, as Kieran Trippier would admit. The big problem was selling Dembele. It baffled me that they let him go. It was that 1% difference between winning a trophy or not. And later that year, it was that 1% difference that forced them to watch Liverpool lift the Champions League trophy right in front of them. In fact, in the 3 years that followed his departure, Pochettino got the sack, Tottenham went through 5 managers, lost 2 finals and finished 4th, 6th and 7th in the league. It's pretty clear who made a difference now, isn't it?